I'll just say that everything that I say is backed up. I've got samples here. Patrick nicely printed out some copies of handouts for me, and I can send a PDF package to anyone who drops me an email. So we all agree that the government's out of control. We all agree that it's been ignoring the limits that the Constitution placed on it for over 100 years, but we don't agree on how to remedy this problem and enforce those constitutional limits on the federal government. And I'm going to start off with two quotes. The first is from H.L. Mencken. For every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. And the second quote is from my amazing grandfather, Ugo Ugolini. If you want to do something fast, go a little slow, and then you won't have to do it again. So an Article 5 convention has also been called the Convention of the States or a Constitutional Convention. The various names are just semantics. They all stand for the same thing. A convention called under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. Now, Black's Law Dictionary defines a constitutional convention as a duly constituted assembly of delegates or representatives of the people of a state or nation for the purpose of framing, revising, or amending its constitution. So all those names work. In my opinion, an Article 5 convention is extremely dangerous, and it cannot be limited to amendments. Why is it dangerous? Because once it's seated, the delegates, however they're chosen, are the direct representatives of the people and have the sovereign power that each of us has, as stated in the Declaration of Independence, to alter or abolish and institute new government. This is not a myth. This is a fundamental right that predates and supersedes the Constitution, as all our inherent rights do. They predate the Constitution, they supersede the Constitution. So any and all talk of how a convention could be limited only to proposing amendments is naive, erroneous, or deceptive, as are statements that a convention that proposed a new constitution would violate numerous federal and state laws, which I've seen in writings by supposed law professors. Remember that the one and only convention yet called was for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation, according to the Journals of Congress, where the call was published. And yet that convention in 1787 was the source of today's Constitution. It tossed out the Articles of Confederation. So, Professor Nadelson, law professor, talks about promises about customs from other conventions that were held all the time in the founding era. It's completely disingenuous. The conventions that he referenced were state conventions and conventions on commerce, other topics. They were not called under Article 5, so there is no precedent, and his claim is specious. So, the Convention of States people say that the states are in charge, so everything is okay. Wrong. The Convention of States site says a Convention of States is called by the state legislatures that they are given power to do so under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. No. Article 5 says the Congress, on application of the legislature, the same thing that Tom read, of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments. So Congress calls the convention. And Article 1, Section 8, the last clause, gives Congress the power necessary and proper to carry out its duty to call the convention. So Congress calls the convention. Congress has the power to make all the rules regarding the convention that they have then been authorized to call. But wouldn't the delegates be good, honorable people who limit themselves to the jobs they were called to do, right? No. Congress, there's no limitation. Congress could appoint themselves as the delegates. Or the states, maybe the states will choose people, but then who are they going to send? Where's today's Washington? Where's Hamilton? Where's Madison? Where's Ben Franklin? Nowhere. We're going to get the cronies and the nepots of the corrupt, ignorant people in the state legislatures. So who would Massachusetts pick? Barney Frank? Paul Patrick? Former Speaker DeLeo if they let him out of jail? Yep. So what about California? Who are they going to pick? New York? Connecticut? They think, who's going to get sent to this? It's not going to be Washington and Madison, today's version. So even if somehow you could limit this convention to amendments only, why would a convention still not rein in the federal government. The problem is that the federal government usurps powers not granted and violates the Constitution. The federal government is given no power by the Constitution to limit personal ownership of firearms, but they impose all kinds of rules doing just that, usurping power they don't have. So, let's pass an amendment stating really clearly that they shall not infringe the right of the people. We have it. And they ignore it. So they will obey new amendments. Why? As Hamilton said in Federalist number 16, it is the duty of the people to enforce the Constitution. Government's always going to try to outgrow its limits. We have fallen asleep on the job, and we are looking for a quick solution to a long-term problem, and those never work well. But don't the states have to ratify anything the Convention proposes? Well, if a convention proposes amendments, then the answer is yes. But if the convention proposes an entirely new constitution, that would come with its own means of ratification. The Articles of Confederation required all 13 states unanimously to agree. The new constitution that they proposed, 9 of the 13 states needed to ratify. They changed the ratification procedure. So, well, what other new constitution? Well, there's 2, to my knowledge, already written, just waiting to be authored. One was written by the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations in the 1950s, and one was written by the Revolutionary Communist Party in 2010. The latter, the communist one, would be adopted by declaration of the new Socialist Republic of America. The first one, from the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations, would be voted on by a national referendum called by the President. The states would have no say, and in fact, they would be abolished under that new Constitution. And of course, there would never be any vote fraud in that referendum called by the President. No. So who else wants a convention? I have an 8-page list, right over here, of organizations that endorse the call for an Article 5 convention. There are hundreds of socialist and fascist groups, including many funded by George Soros. Those groups would not endorse the call unless they thought they could advance their own agenda. We all know that Soros has long wanted to bring about the downfall of the United States. So, what did Chief Justice Burger, James Madison, and the Congressional Research Service say about a convention? Chief Justice Warren Burger said that in his opinion, in a private letter, there is no effective way to limit or muzzle the actions of a constitutional convention. Congress might try to limit the convention, but there is no way to assure that the convention would obey. After a convention is convened, it will be too late to stop the convention if we don't like its agenda. Madison said about the thought of a second convention, I should tremble for the result of a second. And the Congressional Research Service report from last March, I have a copy, there it is. The question of what sort of convention is not likely to be resolved unless or until a convention assembles. Or in other words, we'll have to get a convention in order to know how a convention operates.
You have to pass a bill in order to know what it is.
So, progressives have been pushing for an Article 5 convention in various names for over 50 years. They're hoping to use that format to get rid of our Constitution and impose a new Constitution on us. Are you willing to risk your freedom and the freedom of your children on whether or not a convention can be limited? So what do? Well, we don't hold the convention. Nullification is the remedy that the framers envisioned. And we just did it here in Massachusetts. Just last election cycle with the medical marijuana. And another dozen states have done it as well. Nullification. So we also go a little slow. And we take the long road, the hard road. It's the only road that will succeed in the end. We have to learn the Constitution. Teach your children, teach your friends why the federal government's powers were limited by the Constitution and how that makes life better for everyone. We have to retake our country from the ground up, starting with ourselves, our towns, counties, states, and then we will see change in Washington. Until then, the best we can do is fight a holding action to prevent further degradation. But until we, the people, once again understand the Constitution, because Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about people in pubs discussing the nuances of the Constitution in the early mid-1800s. People used to talk about it all the time and have great discussions. They understood, and so the leaders that they elected were people who also understood the Constitution, because otherwise they didn't get elected again. Until we understand the Constitution as a citizenry, we have no chance to reign in the federal government because it is our duty to enforce the Constitution. We can't know it.